Hey everyone, this is Eric Huey, host of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, where we interview and learn from millennials who are leaders in their fields. These are individuals who have started their own businesses, have a high-ranking title within companies, or simply pursuing non-traditional means, such as their passion or hobby, to support themselves and their families. There still exists this negative stigma around our generation that we are entitled, lazy, and unreliable, so my goal is to prove that wrong, while also inspiring millennials to become the best versions of themselves and go after their big goals. On this episode of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, we'll learn about the importance of taking action from Logan Freeman, former NFL draft pick of the Oakland Raiders turned entrepreneur and real estate mogul. Football unfortunately didn't work out for Logan, and soon after, he lost his father. Hitting rock bottom, Logan was faced with the opportunity to find his true identity and reinvent himself. As the saying goes, sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. Although Logan was faced with a difficult road, the same persistent daily action that gave him a shot at the NFL has now allowed him to have a successful real estate career, recently being named Kansas City's #1 investor-specific realtor in 2018. Now married and now having a beautiful baby girl, Logan tells us about the habits he has built and the actions he continues to take that allow him to be successful in the workplace. Here's my interview with Logan Freeman.
I usually start every episode by asking, what the person's why is, what keeps them motivated and tackling big goals.
So I have a few. I think that first and foremost, obviously living as the best version of myself every single day. And, I'm a firm believer, and my faith is my #1 focus in my life. And so, getting to heaven is my biggest why. And the way that I do that is glorify the gifts that I've been given. And to do that, I need to work out of my strengths. And so my why is to become the best version of myself so I can get to heaven, I can help other people get to heaven. And so what that means in practicality and reality is really focusing on doing the next right thing and bringing value to every individual that I can come into contact with. And I think, obviously, I'm a husband and I'm a soon-to-be father. So
yeah, congratulations.
Living as a hero husband and honoring the vows that I made on our wedding date. And I have a baby girl coming in the next week or two. I don't know when she's going to come. But living a life that will set an example for her in whatever facet, in every facet, is my why. To push myself and challenge myself to be the best version of myself.
Very nice. Congrats on the kiddo again. That's a blessing for sure.
It'll be a life-changing event.
Definitely.
So let's set things up for the listeners a little bit more. Walk us through maybe some of your major life experiences and explain how you got to where you are now.
Grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is about 2.5 hours east of Kansas City. And, I went to Helias and then I went to UCM, and that's where we actually met. And in college, I always identified as an athlete. And high school, always identified as an athlete. And I wanted to be the best athlete that I possibly could be. So I had a pretty successful career and had the opportunity to go out and try out for the Raiders, and was out there for about 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but I didn't make the team, long story short. And that was a great experience. What it really taught me was that my passion did not lie in athletes and athletics, especially at that level. What I really enjoyed about collegiate and high school athletes was the camaraderie between the teammates and working towards a common goal. And in the NFL, you never know when that you're going to get cut, and it's really hard to build that rapport with other individuals unless you have signed a 5-year, $20 million contract, which I did not have. So I went out to there after my senior year in football, and came back to finish my master's degree. And when I finished my master's degree, that was really when my life changed, or when I was working towards finishing my master's degree. And I think it's important to talk about some things that happened at that point. So my father was a drug addict and alcoholic, and he had a downward spiral kind of through college, but then everything came to a head whenever I got cut. Not because of that, but that's just the timing that happened. And so my father passed away in the same time that I was cut from the Raiders. And so I was really trying to figure out who I was as a person and see what I could make of myself. I was no longer an athlete. I was about to finish school. and I just lost my father. So I had a big chance or a big choice, and it was I looked at it as an opportunity to reinvent myself. And I believe we had some summer school classes together.
Yep.
And I was an offensive lineman in the NFL, so I weighed 335 pounds. And when I think I showed up to that first class, I had already lost 40 or 50 pounds of that weight.
I remember. I hardly recognize you. Me and I think it was Sheldon Smith. Who was, I was sitting next to him, and you walked in the back, and I almost leaned over to Sheldon and said, "Who's the new guy?" And it turned out to be you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I lost 100 pounds at that point, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But, I had to put myself through the rest of that master's program because football was no longer helping. And so I went and I looked at my resume. I had no business experience, and I was trying to get out in the business world. So I took a cold calling job selling educational data to schools or to school providers. Sorry. So, you sit down at a desk and you make 200 calls a day, and you see what you can drum up on the business standpoint. So I basically did that just to get something on my resume to help me find my next move. And God willing, I was going to find something different other than that. But so my schedule, I think, is important to talk about because this is where I think a lot of things changed for me. So, during that last semester of school, I was working full time, but I would get up at 3:30 in the morning. I would go work out at Anytime Fitness because it was the only 24-hour gym in Warrensburg. I would go there and work out from 3:30 to 4:30. I'd get ready, eat breakfast, and get ready to go to Sweet Springs, Missouri was where my job was, and I needed to leave by 6:30 to get there on time. So I left at 6:30 to go to Sweet Springs, Missouri, which is about an hour drive, give or take, from 6:30 to 7:30. And what I did on that drive changed my life. I listened to a couple podcasts. So Lewis Howe's the School of Greatness podcast, and that's where I found Tony Robbins. Yeah. And I started listening to his audio CDs. And so I used those 2 hours a day to kind of, the school of, I forget what Zig Ziglar calls it, but it's like the automobile university or something like that.
The mobile classroom.
The mobile classroom,
Yeah.
And so my schedule was wake up at 3:30, go work out, head to Sweet Springs at 6:30, work from 8 to 5 there, get back to Warrensburg and go to class from 6 to 9. And I had no time to do homework, so I would spend 8 to 12 hours in the library on Saturdays. And then I would repeat, and I did that for about 6 months. And this is the same 6 months where my father really started a downward spiral. So when I finished that, I secured a job as the youngest franchise consultant with Jimmy John's at that time, just through sheer persistence of cold calling on people that I thought would be good for me to do. And so I had a hotel and restaurant management. Jimmy John's is a growing brand, and a franchise consultant sounded good for our first job out of college.
Most definitely.
And but when my dad came up to help me move out of my apartment, which, if you remember, were those yellow apartments that were very close to the library, and it was like this big yellow building, and there was no front on the door, and there was cockroaches in the when my mom left, she was crying whenever she left me because I went from being the captain of the football team in the NFL to living in a $500 a month,
right?
Because I didn't have any money,
so
it's
hard out of college.
And my mom literally was crying, and I was like, man, it's time, it's time to do something. But that when my father came to move me out, that's when I really knew something was wrong. And so that was December. In January, he passed away.
Sorry to hear that, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It was it was a tough time. But again, that's when I kind of stepped back and looked at my life from a holistic perspective and said, okay, who do you want to be, Logan? And that's when I started taking the path to progress, so to speak, in personal and professional development. So I went on to work with Jimmy John's for about a year. They rank all of their franchise consultants. I continually was in the top 10%. I was the youngest one in the company out of 90. I kind of asked my direct report, so what's next for me? He said, well, the next move is my job. And I looked at his job, and I was like, I don't want that job. And he said, you're gonna have to wait at least 3 to 5 years. And I said, this isn't for me. I want to be paid for my performance. So again, I started to network and found a startup company that I went and started working for. Had some success there. I was just a little bit too early, I think, in the process, and I was a little bit too impatient for that. So I worked there for 2.5 years, and then moved over to a more what I thought was a stable job and a 6-figure base. So I felt good about that, but at the same time, there was one, I didn't have any drive or energy to do it. I did at the beginning, but it quickly waned. 2, I had no autonomy, and Daniel Pink in his book Drive talks about autonomy being a very big driver of motivation. Mm-hmm. And the week after I sold one of the largest deals that I had, I got fired. They brought on a private equity firm. Yeah, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and that's when I was like, well, what would I want to do? And I was getting coached through Strength Finders at the time by a certified Gallup Strength Finders coach, who, by the way, is now the CEO of Wahlburgers.
Oh, wow.
Bobby Shaw.
That's amazing.
And so he was coaching me for free. We just really connected, and it was just awesome. God, my whole life, has put mentors in my life to help me at that path and that way. And it's been great for me. It's been huge. But that landed me into, he asked me, well, if you go take another job working for somebody else, what's going to be different in 12 months? And I really looked at that and I said, nothing. Mm-hmm. And so the day I got fired, my wife got on the internet, and Missouri, thank God, Missouri, I love Missouri. You can start a company in less than 10 minutes and have it registered, with the state. And Jason Kander is to thank to that, which is interesting. Jason and Diana are good family friends. But anyways, he made that process very simple for people in Missouri when he was the Secretary of State, I think, or whatever position he had. I can't remember. But she got on it. She believed in me, and she started an LLC for me. And I started a consulting company, and I started on this path of real estate. And that's what I'm doing now. Less on the consulting and coaching piece, more on investment property on real estate.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the
that was a long-winded question.
No, it's good. That's kind of wanted to paint a picture of everywhere you've been.
Yeah.
And we can dive more into real estate in a bit, but one thing I want to touch on real quick is your experience with pro football. I mean, that takes an incredible amount of dedication and persistence to even get drafted.
Sure.
To get to that skill level, that body type. So since this is, a success-based podcast, and I try to theme each episode, what I've themed your episode is taking action.
Yeah.
So what were your action steps, or your, the processes that you put in place that you kept telling yourself that you put in front of yourself to this path to follow to get to that point where you were drafted?
Yeah. Well, I'm much more intentional about my processes now. I think that I stumbled upon some things that in my college career and in athletics that led well, and I also had really great coaches that really helped me along the way. But my father instilled in me at a very young age. He said, Logan, you can do anything that you want to if you set your mind to it. And I believe that.
I think you've proven that just in this short overview you've given us.
I mean, it just, everybody idolizes their father, whether he be a great man or a less than impressive person and human being, but you idolize your father. And, or at least to some extent and for some period of time.
Of course.
And so I embodied that. And so for me, the actions that I needed to take, in athletics were, I felt like I believed in myself, and I had other people that were believing in me, and I knew that I wasn't the biggest, fastest, strongest guy or the smartest guy, so I had to outwork people.
Yeah.
And one thing that I know I can do is sit down and put the tunnel vision goggles on, and I identify what I call my most valuable priorities, and then what are the profit-producing activities that are aligned to that. And so in football, it was keep my grades up, be on the dean's list every semester, which I was in college, every single semester.
Yeah, well done.
Which me and Brett Ginn were the only two players to be on the ESPN all academic All-American team, which are pretty cool.
Just another credential to add to
the
Logan Freeman's list.
Which means nothing other than the fact that I put my focus on being the best football player I could be and the best collegiate, student that I could be as well. And the actions I needed to take were in college were lined out for me. Go to class, go to study hall if you have to, study and pass your test. That was no problem. With football, they taught you how to set a goal and then how to work towards it. But then what they also taught me was accountability. So, if you don't go and you don't keep your grades up and you don't go to practice or weights or film, you lose your scholarship, man. So it's very easy for that accountability piece, and you have people checking in on you all the time. So I think what that taught me was, okay, that system works, because we had a successful team career. I had a successful, career as a student and a successful, career as an athlete. Well, whenever I stopped playing football, I think that I applied those same mentalities and systems to my professional career. So setting a goal, reverse engineering on what steps need to be taken, and then creating accountability was the biggest key on that.
Very nice. Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to kind of circle back to from the brief overview you've given us in your career so far was the idea of multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Nowadays that's looked down upon. Our parents' generation, people were at companies 30, 40 years. I would argue that most companies don't have that same loyalty to their employees anymore. So the relationship's different, but nevertheless, there's still this, negative stigma around our generation that we job hop too much. Yeah. We're unreliable. We're only focused on ourselves, things like that. So what do you say to something like that? And, what's the balance between that and, doing something that you really love?
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I can speak to my personal experience.
Of course,
with that. Yeah. I think it's probably different for everybody. However, what I have a strong opinion about is that society has put these norms on us these norms that you need to find a 9-to-5 job and you need to stay with the same company and you put your money away and you retire at 65. What worked for our parents does not work for us. And unfortunately, it's hard for our parents to see that, but who is mostly running companies right now? Our parents.
Right.
We're seeing that shift change, I believe. Peter Voog talks a ton about the millennials in that sense. But if you also look at the statistics, there are more millennial millionaires that have already been created than all of our parents' generation combined. From a percentage standpoint, it's about 5% of our parents and about 25% for millennials.
That's unreal. I didn't know that.
So you have to check out Peter Voogd, and he talks a lot about this whole thing. So, I think it starts with what are you expecting of yourself. So, if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, where you don't have to feel trapped by a company and by a job that I think it's where you start from. So, like, if your parents want you to do something, you have to answer two questions for yourself. One is, do I agree with what they're saying? And two is that going to make me successful and energize me every single day? And so I really could care less if people job hop. What I want to see happen to people, and Ken Coleman talks about this, is to try to find their sweet spot. Mm-hmm. And their sweet spot is just the intersection of their greatest strength and their greatest passion. And inside of that intersection is where they should be working out of. But I also have a very strong opinion about this word passion too. And so I think a better question is what energizes you and what drives you and motivates you. Yeah. And to do that, you need to understand what your strengths are. You need to try to find a job or a career that aligns with those strengths. You need to walk through exactly what you're going to be doing on a daily basis and see if that energizes you. And then you need to get tough, because when people say I'm not passionate about going and working for 12 hours, well, ask Gary Vaynerchuk if he was passionate during college, going home, riding the train home and working and never going on a vacation and never going to a party, never dating. Ask me if he was passionate about that.
Right.
Ask me if I was passionate about waking up at 3:30 in the morning, losing 100 pounds, working a full-time job, and finishing a master's degree. I wasn't passionate about that.
Yeah.
But what I was passionate about was that I was taking a step to set myself up for future success. And so I would tell millennials and our generation who are quote-unquote job hopping to stop seeking self-gratification and be able to delay that. Say, I'm going to do something now that I know is going to help me in the future, and because it's going to be it's going to be better for me in the long run. I think that we get a bad rap for switching jobs too soon, and maybe we do, but I also believe that if we can delay gratification and focus on what's going to energize and drive us in the long term and not worry about doing the hard work at the beginning, that's where the disconnect is. Our parents want us to work really, really hard. We want to do something that's really energizing and passionate, but we don't realize sometimes that we have to do all of the grunt work up front to get to those things that energize and drive us.
Most definitely. I think that's really well said. I think it could be summarized as us seeking a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Agreed.
And not even a long-term problem, just a long-term goal.
Yep.
To your point about instant gratification, kind of, if someone is job hopping, maybe that signals that they want this, long-term end goal, whether it be a high-ranking title in a company or some type of recognition or status. You're obviously not going to get there until you put in the work. So
absolutely,
I think that's well said for sure.
Yeah, and I would urge your readers to read your listeners to read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and I probably butchered that name, but he wrote a book about the journey is the end goal. And that was the big piece of this whole thing, and it's a really cool story. So I would urge your listeners to listen to that book or read that book. It really helped me understand that when you get and achieve something, that's not really the end goal. It's what happens along the way and how you deal with it.
Definitely. Thanks for the recommendation. I'll have to put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we've kind of, stepped through some of your career steps and where you've been, and briefly touch on real estate. So I'd like to get more into that.
Sure.
So you started off with Storybook Realty, correct?
Yeah.
And congrats. I just recently learned that you were the number one investor number one investor specific realtor in Kansas City last year in 2018. That's incredible. I don't think many people in general get to achieve that. Not to mention someone who's in their 20s. So, what led you to that that success?
Sure.
And again, kind of what were some action steps that you took to get there?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jeff Spencer talks about when you're starting a new endeavor, you should, if you have multiple options, you should put pressure on all of the options and see which one pops out at the end and which one prevails.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in that. And also diversifying my income stream. So, I thought I wanted to build a multi-million-dollar consulting business. And what I found out by putting pressure on that and with real estate was I'm much more interested in doing real estate. And it aligns much more with my goals. And so when I sat down, after I was fired and thought about, okay, what can I do that's going to help me get to where I want to go? I had the consulting business, but I was also selling $1.5 million in real estate every single month to investors. And the actions that I took to do that was a simple formula. And I'll tell you this, whenever you find a formula that works for you personally, where you have variable A and variable B, and if you do both of those things, you get the result C, and you can prove that model and it works, there's nothing more motivating than that. Success breeds motivation, and when you have a little bit of that success, it only makes you work harder. And I think Daniel Pink talks about that too. So what drives us is after we have a little bit of success, nothing motivates you more than having a little bit of that. And so I found a model of if I did these type of actions, which my actions were looking at more properties than anybody else in the city. So I underwrote, and that just means that analyzed and reviewed over 550 houses and small multifamily properties last year. So I was physically at 550 different places last year.
That's incredible. How'd you find time to sleep?
I didn't sleep much. Those were 60 to 80 hour weeks. And I was also had 3 full-time consulting clients. And so the actions for the real estate side were very simple. It was I go view properties, I underwrite them and analyze them, and then I send them out to my clients. And another, I guess, more business development role of that was building my client list up. And so positioning myself as the authority and an expert in an investment property in Kansas City started on a forum called Bigger Pockets. And so I would be on Bigger Pockets for a certain amount of hours, just trying to add value to different people and continually to try to grow my list from that website and that forum by adding value to people. And I was able to build my investor list from 0 to over 130 in 1 year.
That's amazing.
And we made offers on 450 properties, and we were able to buy over 120 of them. And so the actions I took with the real estate was pretty simple at the beginning, because I knew that there was a formula that I could take that had been proven out before me, that if you did correctly and you worked harder, faster, and stronger than anybody else, that you were going to have success. On the consulting side, I was just throwing wet noodles at a wall hoping they were sticking. I had no idea what I was doing on that. So yeah, I think that's some of the actions that I was able to take. Now, I read the books, I talked the lingo, I read negotiation tactics, I honed my communication skills, my questions, and I figured out how to build rapport on a telephone from an out-of-state investor that I've never met in person. I don't even know what they look like, to go buy a $700,000 piece of property. So that was a skill that I knew I needed to have, and I spent probably, we have 365 days. Last year I probably spent over 3,000 hours on the phone.
That's unreal.
So those are the actions that I took. Just massive levels of strategic action. And it wasn't very strategic at the beginning, I'll tell you that.
Hey, that's right. It's action oriented, right? Sometimes the action is what gets you the result. Learn by doing, right? Learn
Absolutely.
by doing.
Yes.
I guess we should back up a little bit just for the listeners who are kind of unfamiliar with the real estate sector. So what Logan has done is different from what your traditional realtor would be doing, is just as far as buying and selling homes.
Yeah.
Logan is investor specific, meaning he would be buying on behalf of investors, and then they would either be flipping them or buying and holding them for rental property. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so what I do is I buy income streams. I don't really buy houses.
Right.
So
it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And so, with the volatility of the stock market and who knows where the economy and financial systems are going, and that's not a conversation for us to have right now, but real estate has been a proven model for investors that have liquid cash that they want to invest. And so, I think that what I've done and what we do at Kansas City Investment Real Estate and Plaid Management and Storybook Realty is the companies we're talking about, is we help out-of-state investors purchase solid income-producing properties that they're going to get a certain percentage of cash-on-cash return. And so it's completely different. These are not owner-occupied homes. I sold, I think, one retail home to somebody that moved into it last year. And he was an investor that was going to move into it, flip or update it, and then sell it. So, these are not your typical retail, what we would call retail residential homes. Okay.
But you've taken a similar formula from the residential side and now pivoted to a new venture where it's more commercial facing, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, I think that if in real estate, if you don't have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your market, just like anything else, I'm sure, you're not going to succeed. And, I started to see my offers not be accepted. So prices were going up, inventory was going down, and my investor list was going up. And so I was looking at that saying, well, something's going wrong. And so I need to note too, those 120 properties were in 9 months, not 12. So I didn't buy anything the last 3 months. I was making this pivot into the commercial sector for the last 3 months of 2018.
That's incredible.
So it's 30 properties a month, which was a lot. But that's not. I just that to make the pivot that I've made, I wasn't doing it while I was doing those other things. I think that's important to say, because I couldn't have taken the action on educating myself and networking on the commercial sector. And so I thought this buy, renovate, rent it out, refinance, and repeat model, which I was doing on the single family homes, it just allows an investor to take a certain amount of money, put it into a property, add value to it, rent it out, and then go to the bank and say, hey, I increased the value of this property. Let me get a refinance and get a new mortgage on it, and they can pull their initial equity back out of it. I thought that model would work on the commercial side. And so that was what was my target, was always to be a commercial broker, because that is a very it's a very rewarding, exciting, and interesting career. And doing these types of investment properties, and now what I'm doing is called syndication and equity partnerships, is a great facet to fuel your real estate brokerage. And so I've made this pivot into doing 12,000 square foot commercial buildings, hotels, apartment complexes, and that's not an easy step to take. And I'm still bridging that gap every single day and learning something every single day. But I can tell you what, right now I am in that same massive action time frame, and I'm taking that massive action right now to build this new I guess model out on the commercial side. So I'm moving my license from the residential or the small multifamily and storybook realty to a professional brokerage on the commercial side, where I have a great mentor to learn from and so many new skills to develop and get really excited about.
Do you want to mention that company at all, or is that something you want to keep?
No, it's Clemens Real Estate, and so they dominate the Midtown market, and it's I'm allergic to corporate settings, and and so the owners over there are very entrepreneurial themselves. They are. What I wanted to do is go to a company that I thought were really great owners of property themselves, and learn from them. And so they own over close to 1,000 units in the Midtown market, and they manage it. They have a team and all of these great things for me to learn. But we started a subsidiary company out of Clemens Real Estate called Syndicate, where we are doing the value add commercial properties, which allows investors to be passive into these big types of deals.
Okay, that makes sense. We've talked a lot about your success, your career path, now real estate. To be action-oriented, to have success, you have to have, a good day, a good daily routine. Yeah. So walk us through what your daily routine looks like now. How much are you at home on the phone versus out at properties, things like that?
Sure. So my daily routine, this might sound a little crazy to some people, but I do wake up at 4 a.m. every day. From 4 a.m. to 5 a.m., I am working on, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., I'm doing one of 5 things. And I read The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod a long time ago. And maybe I didn't even read the book. I probably just read a summary of the book. But he talks about this morning routine called SAVERS, which is silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. And so I took an iteration of that, and I also looked at what Tony Robbins does, and I tested this out a lot of different ways, and I finally found something that worked for me. So from 4 to 5 a.m., I'm kind of waking up, I'm drinking some water, I'm going downstairs, and I'm praying. So I am focused on building my relationship with Christ from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. every single day. So that's reading scripture, that's praying, and that's sitting in silence. So that's from 4 to 5, and that kind of sets my barometer for the day. And then from 5 to 6, I do what's called the Productivity Planner from Brendan Burchard. And so I'm looking at, he has a morning mindset routine. So he asks you questions like, who do you want to be today? What are your top 3 goals? Who needs you on your A game? What tasks need to be completed? And then it has an hour by hour where I actually go through and I plan out my day. So I'm thinking about that in before my day starts from 5 to 6. And I might do some email then as well. It just kind of depends on what I need, what I'm doing. And then from 6 to 7, I'm working out. And then and that's every day. Saturdays and Sundays included. I sleep in on Sundays to about 6, I think, sometimes. 5 or 6.
I don't know if you can count that as sleeping in, Logan.
But Saturday, I'm doing the same thing. So, Saturday, I'm up at 4 a.m. And I try to spend some time with my wife on Saturdays. But from Monday through Saturday, it's really the same morning routine. Sunday, I'm a little more lax on it. And then I get back home, I get showered up, and I get ready for the day, and then I head into the office, which it looks a little different for me every single day. So I might be viewing a property now. I'm looking at a whole lot less properties because these are, I'm going to have to do the same amount of in annual volume from a sales perspective. I'm going to need to do we did 120 properties last year, about 15 million. To do 15 million, I need to do about 10 or 12 properties this year.
Wow.
So it's a lot different game, and that's a big reason why I made that shift, because I thought my time was not best spent out on the road looking at properties, but was calling on actual property owners.
Right.
And so now I'm going after property owners, trying to find off-market deals. I'm talking to investors, making sure that we subscribe all of our investments, and I'm learning right now. So I have a lot of I read at least for 30 minutes a day, and I want to get that up.
Yeah.
But I do read for at least 30 minutes a day, and I'm a speed reader, so I used to think that I had to, and we'll talk about reading a little bit, but I used to think I had to read a book from start to finish, and if I can get one just nugget out of a book. So I kind of speed read through things and keep them as resources instead of looking at, okay, hey, I accomplished that. So I'm reading throughout the day, but I for 6 out of the 8 hours of the day, I'm on the phone, either talking with my current investors, reaching out to new investors, or calling property owners trying to get listings, or taking care of some of my other properties.
Massive action, it sounds like.
Yeah.
You mentioned your wife, so I kind of want to touch on that too. As far as with success comes a certain amount of sacrifice or time away from home. So how do you and Taylor go about, or maybe more so, how do you go about verbalizing your goals and aspirations to Taylor, and how do you openly talk and discuss about that balance of what leads to a successful marriage?
It's a great question, and trust me, I'm still working on that.
Yeah, aren't we all?
However, I think that me getting up at 4 a.m. allows me to do things that I don't have to do when I'm with her. So I do get some reading in the morning as well. Personal and professional development in the morning, and exercise. That's a big reason why I exercise every morning, because I know in the evenings something's going to come up, and I'm gonna be tired, man. I'm not going to do it in the evenings. So Taylor and I have a planning session and that sounds kind of goofy, but a planning session every December,
okay,
where we sit down and we work through a massive process that takes about 6 to 8 hours personally each together to walk through what we want 2019 or the next year to look like, what our top 3 goals are, how we're going to help each other get there, and we're very aligned. And if she believes that I'm not doing something or working towards the right goal, she's my biggest accountability partner that I have.
That's amazing.
And so from the standpoint, if you think about it, so I wake up at 4 and get my day started. By 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., I've already got 12 or 14 hours into the day. So by 6 p.m., I turn you see how my phone is right now? It's turned over. By 6 p.m., my phone is turned over, and it's not anywhere near me. And so I look at it before I go to bed. I'm like, yeah, I'll deal with that stuff tomorrow. And I put my phone in a completely separate room out of the bedroom too. So the way that I'm intentional about that is when I'm with Taylor and when I'm with somebody, I'm present in the moment. And throughout the day, you can get me from 8 to 5 or 6. You can get me, but after 6 p.m., that is time with my wife, and we are either hanging out playing Scrabble or going out on a dinner date, or just listening to her and or coming down here on this nice couch and watching one of her shows that I could care less about. But that the big part of that is spending carefree timelessness with her. So really, I think it's being able to shut it off and get present and release the tension and bring the intention in every single situation.
Most definitely. What do you think keeps people from taking action?
Yep. I wrote this down, and the key to being a successful man or woman of action is to be a man or woman of courage. And patience is courage born out over time. And that really struck me. I don't remember where I read that because I definitely didn't write that. But I did write it down so I could remember it, right? And to be a man or woman of action means you have to have courage. And to have courage, you have to have fortitude. And so if I was to give some advice to somebody that was working towards a goal, any type of goal, I would say that you really need to focus on and know that you're going to fail. And, know that fear is going to come up. And my definition of fear is just false emotions appearing real.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good acronym for it.
Most definitely.
The only way I've learned to get through fear is to step back into it. Mm. And I can tell you, I've had a ton of anxiety and fear in January about what I'm doing right now. I have a baby coming. I don't have a check coming until a certain date. And my wife's about to go on maternity leave. And I'm starting a whole new. So you better believe I have that fear, so to speak. And I don't think fear is bad. I think if you allow it to stay and stifle you, that's when it turns to something that's bad. So to be a man or a woman of action, you have to have courage. And courage is just patience born out of time. Because I think there's a good story about this group of men who were drilling for gold, and they drilled and they drilled and they dug for weeks and months. They dug for this gold, and they gave up. They said, well, there must not be any gold here. Well, they sold the land for pennies on the dollar, and the guy, and this is a real estate thing, right? Because I love this story. So somebody came in and bought that land, and they're like, man, those are some really big holes, and they had somebody come out and say, yeah, there's a good possibility that there might be some gold here. He dug for one day and hit the jackpot. Those men just were one day away. And it's the same with our lives. If you never give up and you stay persistent and you have patience, you have to have patience and courage to bore that out over time. You will hit your honey hole. But I think that you need to really be focused on knowing that you have to be the master of your own emotions.
In regard to this theme of action, what are some books, maybe your top 2 or 3, that you would recommend for someone to help take them action, overcome some of the fear, anxiety, or whatever they're battling that we've been talking about?
Let's see. First, I'm going to say the Bible. So getting into the scriptures, and that's the best foundation that I have found to living a successful life and living as the best version of yourself. And I do think that most books and principles were derived from that. So that would be my first one, is to read that on a daily basis. I do. And it challenges me on a daily basis. Secondly, I think from a personal and professional development standpoint, I would read Strength Finders 2.0 and Emotional Intelligence. And I would not just read those. I would study them. I would apply the principles. And I would look at everything in life through those lenses.
It's good advice, yeah.
That was so important for me.
Yeah, I've been through them too. I haven't spent enough time on them. I could definitely revisit them. Strength Finders, I've visited quite a bit more than Emotional Intelligence, but I would agree that those are definitely resources to keep on your shelf or on your desk and continually revisit.
Yeah. On that same note, a book called Crucial Conversations will really, really help, because we see the world as we want to see the world, not how it is. And that's good and bad. It's bad in the sense that we're blind a lot of times, but it's really good because if you can create the world that you want to see, and feel, you operate out of that. And Crucial Conversations really highlighted that fact that everything that happens to us, there's a point where we tell ourselves a story about it. And that story dictates how we're going to respond. And so I believe your beliefs leads to your emotions, which leads to your actions, which leads to your results. So I start with my beliefs. I then master my emotions. That allows me to take massive action and get the results that I'm trying to get to. So that's one thing. I think from a business standpoint, if you want to be an entrepreneur or learn about business, read Everything by MJ DeMarco. You can get your hands on. The Millionaire's Fast Lane, terrible name. Best business book I've ever read for entrepreneurs. The One Thing by Gary Keller also stands out to get focused and take massive diligent action. 10X by Grant Cardone.
I actually just finished that one up. I heard you mention it, so I wanted to burn through it before this interview. But it's a very interesting concept, but I can see why it would allow people to be successful, because if you set a huge goal and miss, you'll still be successful. But if you set a goal that's too low, then you're going to start this negative feedback loop and start this negative dialogue with yourself of how things aren't possible. And
I would urge your listeners not to read that physically, to listen to Grant Cardone on Audible, because he brings the fire.
He does.
And so that would be one on that front. I listen to that quarterly. So every 3 months I listen to that book in the gym.
Yeah.
And so that was that. I think that from a real estate standpoint, I would just start out with Rich Dad, Poor Dad and just learn the mindset about that, and that there is another way to think about the world. MJ DeMarco will get you on that same path. In more, and this is a lot of books, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's all good resources.
In more detail, on one book that has changed my personal and professional career is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
I keep hearing that one. Haven't read that one yet.
Yeah. I practice his negotiations standpoints with my wife, with everybody. So that would be one. And most recently that I read, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink was a game changer for me too. I'll stop there. And if people want my book list, they can contact me directly, and I'll
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, that's kind of.
I could kind of keep going. So.
Yeah, that was gonna be my last thing. I want this podcast to be a resource for listeners, but I also want it to be a resource for guests who spend their time giving this knowledge as well. So if there's anyone out there looking for to invest in real estate, or to just learn more about real estate investing, goal setting, anything, how best can people contact you?
Yeah, so my website is livefreeman.com. So that's LIVEFREEMAN.com. You can also go to livefreeinvestments.com. They both point to the same website. And my email is just Logan, LOGAN, at livefreeman.com. So that's how you can get a hold of me. If I can't help you, I'm networking every single day, and if you're in the Kansas City area, you know that there's only 2 degrees of separation to really anybody, and I can point you in the right direction. And I live by the fact that Zig Ziglar said, if you help enough other people in the world get what they want, you're ultimately going to get what you want.
That wraps up today's episode. I want to thank you all again for listening. My name is Eric Huey, and my goal is to provide you with inspiring content that helps you do your job better or go after your big goals. I'd appreciate your feedback with a rating or review on whichever platform you found the show. And if you'd like to share your feedback directly, or if you know someone who would be a great guest on the show, feel free to email me directly at GenWhyLeaders@gmail.com. That's GenWhyLeaders@gmail.com. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.